The rain had been falling all afternoon, washing the crowded streets in a silver mist. Pedestrians hurried along, shielding themselves beneath umbrellas, while cars hissed through the wet roads. In the corner of a dimly lit alley, a young girl sat on a torn cardboard sheet, hugging her knees against the cold. Her clothes were threadbare, her shoes mismatched, and yet her eyes carried a strange strength, as if life had tested her too much to break her easily. Her name was Amara, and at just 17, she already knew the meaning of hunger, rejection, and loneliness far too well. That evening, as the city lights flickered to life, Amara noticed a sleek black car parked just a few steps away from where she sat. A tall man in a tailored suit stepped out, clearly in a rush, his phone pressed tightly against his ear. His presence radiated authority, the kind that made strangers instinctively step aside. But in his haste, he didn't notice the leather wallet slipping from his pocket and landing on the wet pavement. Amara's gaze fell upon it. The wallet looked expensive, gleaming faintly under the streetlight. For a moment, her stomach twisted with temptation. She hadn't eaten properly in days. If she opened it, she was certain to find enough money to survive for weeks, maybe even longer. Her hand hovered above it, trembling, not from the cold, but from the battle within her heart. Finally, she picked it up. The weight of the wallet was heavier than she expected, but what weighed on her more was the choice she was about to make. Slowly, she stood up, her legs weak but determined. She hurried after the man, her bare feet splashing through shallow puddles. "Sir, excuse me," she called out, her voice almost drowned by the sounds of traffic. The man turned, irritation flashing in his eyes, until he noticed the wallet in her small hands. His brows furrowed in surprise. "You dropped this," Amara said quietly, holding it out with both hands as though it were something sacred. He stared at her for a long moment, then down at the wallet, and then back at her. Most would have run away with it. Yet here she was, soaked and shivering, handing it back without hesitation. "Do you know what this is worth?" he asked, his voice calm but sharp. Amara shook her head. "It's not mine, so it doesn't matter what it's worth." For the first time that day, the billionaire, Mr. Adewale, felt something shift inside him. He took the wallet, still studying her as though she were a puzzle he could not solve. The city's brightest tower stood behind him, while she, fragile and worn, stood in the shadows. Yet she carried an integrity that money could not buy. "Come with me," he said suddenly. Amara froze. Her instincts told her to run. She had learned the hard way that when strangers offered kindness, there was always a hidden price. But something in his tone was different, steady and commanding yet strangely gentle. Still hesitant, she whispered, "Why?" "Because honesty like yours shouldn't be left out here in the cold," he replied. And with those words, he opened the car door. Amara's eyes darted from the open car door to the man's steady gaze. She felt the pull of two worlds, one of fear, born of endless nights where promises turned into threats, and one of curiosity, where the smallest chance of kindness might finally break the chains of despair. Her body shivered under the rain, her teeth chattering, but her feet seemed frozen to the ground. "Get in," Mr. Adewale urged again, softer this time. She hesitated, but eventually her hunger outweighed her suspicion. She slid carefully into the back seat, the warmth of the leather interior wrapping around her like a long-forgotten embrace. The car smelled of polished wood and expensive cologne, so unlike the stench of damp alleys and trash cans she was used to. For a moment, she allowed herself to sink into the seat, her shoulders sagging from exhaustion. The driver glanced at her in the rear-view mirror, but said nothing. Mr. Adewale settled beside her, adjusting his cufflinks with precise movements. Silence filled the car until he broke it. "What's your name?" "Amara," she answered, her voice barely above a whisper. "And how long have you been living on the streets, Amara?" Her hands fidgeted in her lap, tugging at the frayed edges of her sleeve. "A year, maybe more. Time, it doesn't feel the same when you don't have anywhere to be." His jaw tightened slightly. He turned his gaze to the rain-streaked window, hiding the storm that had begun brewing inside him. For all his billions, all his control over boardrooms and empires, he had never known what it meant to survive the streets. He could not fathom how someone so young could endure such cruelty. The car rolled through the city, leaving behind the narrow alleys and entering neighborhoods of glass towers and glowing billboards. Amara's wide eyes followed the sights as though she were seeing another world altogether. When the car finally stopped, she looked out and froze. A towering mansion stood before her, its gates guarded, its walls rising like a fortress. Light spilled from crystal chandeliers through enormous windows. She turned to him in shock. I can't go in there, she stammered. You already have, he replied firmly, stepping out and waiting for her. Her legs trembled as she followed him up the marble steps. Inside, the sheer scale of the house overwhelmed her. The grand staircase, the glistening floors, the priceless art on the walls. She felt like an intruder, her ragged clothes soaking onto the polished ground. She wrapped her arms around herself, as if trying to make herself invisible. A maid appeared, startled by Amar's condition, but a single look from Mr. Adewale silenced any questions. Prepare a guest room, he instructed, and bring her something warm to eat. Amara's stomach knotted at the mention of food. She hadn't realized how desperately hungry she was until that moment. The maid hurried off, and within minutes, Amara found herself seated at a long dining table. A steaming plate was placed before her, rice, chicken, vegetables, things she hadn't tasted in months. She didn't wait for permission. She ate with trembling hands, each bite both painful and blissful. Mr. Adewale watched her silently, studying the raw desperation with which she devoured the meal. He had attended dinners worth tens of thousands, where the richest of the rich picked delicately at dishes they didn't care about. Yet here, watching this girl savor every grain of rice, he saw a truth that money had blinded him to for years. When she finally slowed, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand, she whispered, "Thank you. I don't know why you're doing this, but thank you." He leaned forward slightly. "Because you reminded me tonight of something I'd almost forgotten. That honesty still exists. And that integrity doesn't come with a price tag." Her eyes dropped, her cheeks flushing with both shyness and disbelief. "Most people don't notice someone like me, let alone bring them into their home." "That's because most people," he said, his voice deepening, "don't know how to see beyond the surface." The maid returned, informing them that the guest room was ready. Amara was led upstairs to a room larger than any she had ever stepped into. A canopy bed, soft rugs, curtains that shimmered in the lamplight. She couldn't move at first, as though afraid she would break something by breathing. The maid placed folded clothes on the bed, clean and simple but warm, and showed her to a private bathroom. Amara stood under hot running water for the first time in over a year, her body trembling as the grime and cold washed away. She stared at her reflection in the mirror afterward, hardly recognizing the girl who looked back. Her hair, no longer tangled with dirt, framed a face that carried both weariness and quiet resilience. When she finally crawled into the soft bed, her body melted against the mattress. She tried to fight the pull of sleep, afraid it was all a dream, but exhaustion claimed her quickly. Downstairs, Mr. Adewale sat alone in his study, the wallet she had returned lying on the desk. He opened it, removing a small photograph tucked inside, an image of his late wife. She had always told him that wealth was meaningless if it couldn't touch lives beyond their own. He had buried himself in work after her passing, building walls of steel and money around his grief. But tonight, a homeless girl had shattered those walls with nothing more than a simple act of honesty. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, he felt a strange warmth tugging at the cold corners of his heart. The next morning, Amara awoke to sunlight filtering through the curtains. She stretched, half expecting to be back on her cardboard matinale. But the soft sheets and the quiet hum of the mansion told her it was real. She dressed quickly in the clean clothes provided, the fabric rough against her skin only because she wasn't used to anything better. When she stepped into the dining hall, she found Mr. Adewale already there, sipping coffee and reading the morning paper. Without looking up, he said, "Sit. Eat." The table was set with fresh bread, eggs, fruit, and tea. Amara hesitated before taking her seat, the sight almost overwhelming. As she began to eat, he folded the paper neatly and studied her again. "Tell me, Amara, what do you want from life?" The question startled her. No one had ever asked. On the streets, Survival was the only answer that mattered. She placed her fork down slowly. I don't know. I used to dream of being a teacher, before I lost everything. But dreams don't feed you when you're starving. He nodded thoughtfully. What if I told you that dreams can feed you if you have the right tools to chase them? Her eyes widened, a flicker of hope breaking through her guarded expression. What do you mean? I mean, he said firmly, that if you could return something as valuable as my wallet without a second thought, then you've proven you deserve more than scraps of life. I want to give you an opportunity, a chance to rebuild, to learn, to live again. Her heart pounded in her chest, the weight of his words almost too much to believe. For so long she had been invisible, dismissed as another forgotten soul. Now, for the first time, someone saw her potential. But deep down, fear whispered. Nothing in her life had come without a price. And though she wanted desperately to trust him, she couldn't help but wonder what he truly wanted from her. Why me? She asked softly, her voice carrying both hope and suspicion. He leaned back, a faint smile touching his lips. Because sometimes fate puts the right people in our path when we least expect it. You return my wallet, Amara, but maybe, just maybe, you return something far greater to me as well. Her chest tightened. She wanted to ask what he meant, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she looked down at her plate, pushing the fruit around with her fork, lost in a storm of thoughts. And as she sat there, unaware, Mr. Adewale's mind was already weaving plans that would alter both their lives forever. Amara could hardly focus on the food before her. The weight of Mr. Adewale's words lingered in the air like a secret too heavy to carry. She had never been chosen, never been considered worthy of anything beyond pity, and now this powerful man spoke as though her very existence held value. It made her heart ache, both with longing and with fear. Over the days that followed, she began to discover a world she had never imagined she could belong to. Tutors were arranged for her, clothes were bought, and even a small library room was open to her. At first, Amara was hesitant to accept any of it. The voice of the street still clung to her. Asterisk, nothing is free. Kindness is always a mask. Trust no one star. Yet each morning when she awoke in the comfort of the guest room, each evening when Mr. Adewale asked her about her lessons or offered her gentle but firm advice, she realized something she had never felt before. Consistency. Still, doubt gnawed at her. One night, unable to sleep, she wandered into the vast garden at the back of the mansion. The moonlight fell on the trimmed hedges and marble fountains, a sight so surreal she almost laughed. She sat on a stone bench, wrapping her arms around herself, whispering, "This isn't my life. I don't belong here." "You do," came a voice behind her. She turned, startled, to see Mr. Adewale standing with his hands in his pockets. He studied her, his expression calm but unyielding. "Do you think I brought you here by mistake?" Her throat tightened. "Why me? There are so many people suffering on the streets. Why did you choose me?" He stepped closer, his voice deep and steady. "Because you chose honesty when it mattered most. Anyone can pretend to be good when life is easy. But when hunger gnaws at your stomach, when desperation blinds your judgment, that's when true character is revealed. You returned my wallet when you could have run with it. That choice revealed who you are." Amara's eyes burned with tears. She tried to hold back. "But I'm broken," she whispered. "I don't even know who I am anymore." Mr. Adewale sat beside her, his gaze fixed on the fountain. "Broken things can be rebuilt, Amara. Sometimes they come back even stronger, more beautiful than before. I've built empires from dust, rebuilt companies others had abandoned. But what you've given me is something wealth could never buy. You reminded me of humanity. I thought I had lost that forever." For the first time, she realized that beneath his commanding presence lay a man who carried grief just as heavy as her own. Their scars were different, but the pain was familiar. From that night, something shifted between them. It was no longer about charity or obligation. It became a bond, one rooted in respect and a shared journey of healing. Amara threw herself into her studies, and Mr. Adewale became both a mentor and a guide. The household staff, initially skeptical, began to see the change in her. The timid, starved girl who had walked into the mansion was slowly transforming into a young woman with purpose in her eyes and determination in her step. Months passed, and Amara's progress astonished everyone. She devoured books, asked endless questions, and spoke with a confidence she had never known before. Mr. Adewale enrolled her in a private academy, where she excelled beyond expectations. At first, the other students mocked her background, but soon her brilliance silenced every insult. Yet Amara never forgot the streets. Every weekend, she asked Mr. Adewale to drive her back into the alleys she once called home. She would sit with the children, sharing stories, food, and sometimes even clothes she had outgrown. She knew what it meant to be invisible, and she refused to let others feel the same way. Mr. Adewale watched her with quiet pride, knowing she was becoming something extraordinary, something even he had not anticipated. But the true turning point came a year later, when Mr. Adewale gathered her in his study. The same wallet she had returned sat on the desk between them, its leather now worn from time. He slid it toward her. "Do you remember this?" he asked. Amara nodded. "Of course. It's where it all began." He leaned forward, his voice carrying a weight that made her pulse quicken. "What you don't know is that this wallet contained more than money. Inside was a key to a vault that holds my most important documents, shares, and legacies. If you had taken it, you wouldn't have just stolen money. You would have held my entire empire in your hands. And yet, you never even opened it." Her breath caught. She stared at him in disbelief, unable to form words. "You didn't just return a wallet, Amara. You returned my trust in humanity, and I intend to repay that debt in full." From the drawer, he pulled out a stack of papers and handed them to her. Confused, she scanned them, her eyes widening as she realized what they were: documents bearing her name, declaring her a legal heir to part of his foundation, giving her rights and responsibilities she had never dreamed of. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would you do this?" He looked at her with steady intensity. "Because you earned it, not with wealth, not with power, but with honesty when you had nothing. That's the kind of integrity the world needs in leadership. You won't just carry my name, Amara, you'll carry my vision." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she clutched the papers to her chest. For a girl who once slept in the rain, invisible to the world, this moment felt like stepping into sunlight after a lifetime of darkness. Word of her story began to spread, first in whispers, then in headlines. "Homeless girl becomes protege of billionaire," the newspapers declared. Some doubted her. Others criticized Mr. Adewale's decision, but Amara did not let the noise sway her. She poured her energy into creating programs for children on the streets, opening shelters, and building schools. Her past became her strength, her scars a foundation of her empathy. Years later, standing before a crowd of thousands at the launch of her own foundation, Amara's voice rang clear and powerful. "I was once a girl no one saw, no one cared about. But one act of honesty changed my life. Not because I returned a wallet, but because I chose to be true to myself when no one was watching. That choice opened a door I never thought existed. And now, I am here to open doors for others." The audience erupted in applause, but Amara's gaze found Mr. Adewale in the front row. He sat with quiet pride, his eyes reflecting the same conviction he had seen in her that rainy night. In that moment, Amara understood something profound. She had not been rescued. She had been given a chance to reveal who she truly was. And in doing so, she had transformed not just her own destiny, but the destiny of countless others who would walk through the doors she was now building. Her journey from the shadows of the streets to the spotlight of change was more than luck. It was proof that the smallest choice, the simplest act of integrity, could ripple into something magnificent. And as the cheers rose around her, Amara felt the warmth of belonging, of purpose, of destiny. For the first time in her life, she no longer whispered, "I don't belong here." Now, standing tall and unafraid, she declared silently to herself, "This is exactly where I was always meant to be." The night rain that once drenched her lonely figure had given way to a sunrise that painted her name across the horizon, not as a forgotten soul, but as a beacon of hope. And beside her, the billionaire who had once lost his wallet had gained something far greater, a daughter of destiny, born not of blood, but of truth, resilience, and unshakable honor.